Flying has become a normal part of our everyday lives in the last few decades. Knowing this figure for certain is difficult, as there's no official database recorded who has been on a plane. But informal surnames and industry experts reveal some guesses. Former Boeing CEO Dennis Muilenburg states that less than 20% of the world's population has ever flown in a plane. Other estimates put it at less than 10%. If you've taken a flight, you're one of the few people in the world to experience flying at high speeds thousands of feet up in the air. We don't usually give it much thought, as long as we get safely to our destination. But it's a fascinating business, and we'd like to share with you a couple of the most interesting and fun facts about planes and flying. First off, aeroplanes are designed to withstand lightning strikes. Planes are designed to be struck by lightning, and they regularly are hit. It's estimated that lightning strikes each aircraft once a year, or once per 1,000 hours of flight time. Yet lightning hasn't brought down a plane since 1963. Due to careful engineering that lets the electric charge of a lightning bolt run through the plane and out of it, typically without causing damage to the plane. Next, there's no safest seat on the plane. In the aftermath of the Turkish Airlines crash in Amsterdam in 2009, in which 9 people died, but others walked away with little more than a few bruises, many asked what's the safest place to sit in a plane. I don't believe that there's such a thing as the safest spot on a plane. As with all types of accidents, there are so many factors involved to determine the outcome. For instance, some contend that sitting in line with the wing is the safest, as there are over-wing exits and that area is the strongest part of a plane structure. However, you're also sitting near the plane's fuel tanks, which isn't ideal if there's a fire. An article in the Dutch daily Het Parool highlighted various studies on this subject. A scientific magazine, Popular Mechanics, did a study in 2007 of air crashes in the US since 1971. The study concluded that passengers who sit in the back rows are 40% more likely to survive a crash than those in the front. Statistics provided by the Federal Aviation Administration support this finding. According to their stats, the back third of the plane had the lowest fatality rate, while the highest fatality rate was found at the aisles in the middle section. A separate study of 105 air crashes by British experts concluded that the most dangerous seats are those by the window, especially at the back. However, if there is a fire, passengers who sit in the front have a better chance of escaping than those in the back. Passengers who sit within 5 rows of an exit have the biggest chance of escaping alive during a fire in a plane. So, is there really a safest spot? Airlines contend that there's no such thing. I'd agree, as there's so many random factors to consider during an accident. However, statistically speaking, a seat close to an exit in the front or rear, or a middle seat in the back third of the plane offers the lowest fatality rate. That said, flying is still the safest form of transport, so statistically you're much safer in a plane than any other mode of transport. Number 3. Some airplanes have secret bedrooms for flight crew. On long-haul flights, a cabin crew can work 16-hour days. To help them combat fatigue, some planes like the Boeing 777 and 787 Dreamliners are outfitted with tiny bedrooms where the flight crew can get a little shut-eye. The bedrooms are typically accessed via a hidden staircase that leads up to a small, low-ceilinged room with 6 to 8 beds, a bathroom, and sometimes in-flight entertainment. Next up, I want to talk about those oxygen masks. The safety instructions on most flights include how to use the oxygen mask that's deployed when the plane experiences a sudden loss in cabin pressure. However, one thing that flight attendants don't tell you is that oxygen masks only have about 14 minutes worth of oxygen. That sounds like a frighteningly short amount of time, but in reality that should be more than sufficient. Remember that oxygen masks drop when the airplane cabin loses pressure, which means the plane is losing altitude. According to Gizmodo, a pilot will respond to that situation by donning an oxygen mask and moving the plane to an altitude below 10,000 feet, where passengers can simply breathe normally. No extra oxygen is required. That rapid descent usually takes way less than 15 minutes, meaning those oxygen masks have more than enough air to protect passengers. Number 5. The tyres are designed to not pop on landing. The tyres on an airplane are designed to withstand incredible weight loads, up to 38 tons, and can hit the ground at 170 miles per hour more than 500 times before ever needing to get a retread. Additionally, airplane tyres are inflated to 200 psi, which is about 6 times the pressure used in a car tyre. If an airplane does need a new tyre, the ground crew simply jack up the plane like you would a car. Number 6. Why cabin crews dim the lights when a plane is landing. When a plane lands at night, cabin crews will dim the interior lights. Why? Well, in the unlikely event that the plane landing goes badly and passengers need to evacuate, their eyes will already be adjusted to the darkness. Imagine being in an unfamiliar bright room filled with obstacles when someone turns off the lights and asks you to exit quickly. It'd be impossible. Similarly, flight attendants have passengers raise their window shades during landing so they can see outside in an emergency and assess if one side of the plane is better for an evacuation. By the way, if you want to know more about this type of interesting topic, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. To get updates, press the bell icon. Number 7. You don't need both engines to fly. The idea of an engine going out mid-flight sounds frightening, but every commercial airplane can safely fly with just one engine. Operating with half the engine power can make a plane less fuel efficient and may reduce its range, but planes are designed and tested for such situations, as Popular Mechanics reported. Any plane scheduled for a long-distance route, especially those that fly over oceans or through uninhabited areas like the Arctic, must be certified by the Federal Aviation Administration for extended range twin operations, which is basically how long it can fly with one engine. The Boeing Dreamliner is certified for ETO PS 330, which means it can fly for 330 minutes with just one engine. In fact, most airplanes can fly for a surprisingly long distance with no engines at all, thanks to something called glide ratio. Due to careful aeronautical engineering, a Boeing 747 can glide for 2 miles for every 1,000 feet they are above the ground, which is usually more than enough time to get everyone safely to the ground. Number 8. Why are there ashtrays in bathrooms? The FAA banned smoking on planes, but eagle-eyed passengers know that airplane lavatories still have ashtrays in them. As Business Insider reported, the reason is that airlines and people who design planes figure that despite the no smoking policy and myriad of no smoking signs prominently posted on a plane, at some point a smoker will decide to light up a cigarette on the plane. The hope is that if someone violates a smoking policy, they'll do so in the relatively confined space of the bathroom and dispose of the cigarette butt in a safe place like the ashtray, not a trash can where it can theoretically cause a fire. If you do smoke in the bathroom, expect a massive fine. Number 9. What's a tiny hole in an airplane window? It's to regulate cabin pressure. Most airplane windows are made of 3 panels of acrylic. The exterior window works as you would expect, keeping the elements out and maintaining cabin pressure. In the unlikely event that something happens to the exterior of the pane, the second pane acts as a fail-safe option. The tiny hole in the interior window is there to regulate air pressure, so the middle pane remains intact and uncompromised until it's called into duty. Number 10. Do pilots eat the same food as passengers? The safety of airline passengers relies on a calm, controlled flight deck. So when commercial airline pilots show up to work, they have a very different rules than the rest of us on the ground. For example, pilots can request specific co-workers with whom they'd rather not share a cockpit. And there's another rule that prevents pilots and co-pilots from eating the same meals while they're working. While the rule may seem arbitrary, there's actually very good reasoning behind it. If, for example, something goes wrong with one meal, the other pilot will not be affected and can take over duties. The practice is not mandated by the Federal Aviation Administration. However, most airlines have their own rules about it. Pilots are also generally encouraged to avoid foods like raw fish before and during the flight, to avoid a situation like the one comically depicted in Airplane. The pilot usually receives a first-class meal while the co-pilot will get a meal from the business class. Although some pilots on Quora reported that a kind first officer will generally let the first officer choose their meal first. Food poisoning on board airplanes are rare, although it has happened. In 1982, some bad tapioca pudding incapacitated 10 crew members, including the pilot, co-pilot and flight engineer on a flight from Boston to Lisbon. The flight was able to turn around and land back in Boston without further incident. According to data from 2010, at least 2 pilots in the UK fell ill to food poisoning that year while in the cockpit, although the cause of food poisoning could have been from something eaten before boarding. Number 11, and finally on this list, why does airplane food taste so bad? Airplane food has a bad reputation, but the food itself isn't entirely to blame. The real fault lies with the plane. A 2015 Cornell University study reported in Time magazine found that the environment inside an airplane actually alters the way food and drink tastes. Sweet items taste less sweet, whilst salty flavors are heightened. The dry recycled air inside the plane cabin doesn't help either, as low humidity can dull taste and smell, making everything in a plane seem bland. According to a 2010 study from the Fraunhofer Institute of Building Physics in Germany, it's about 30% more difficult to detect sweet and salty tastes when you're up in the air. Next time you fly, skip the meal and maybe try a glass of tomato juice instead.